Awesome. Hello, everyone. Today is November 7th, 2022. This is a meeting of the SIG Network Policy API subgroup to SIG Network. It is a CNCF certified meeting, so let's be nice and have a good one today. So it's the week, or I guess the meeting following KubeCon. So I see some familiar faces here who I met at KubeCon and may not have been here before. I think it'd be great to just kind of get a quick intro, say hi while you're here. So yeah, I think I see three. So Mike, Brian, and David, in whatever order you want to go in. Just give us a quick intro while you're here, who you work for, if you want. Anything else you want us to know?
Hey, I'm Mike. I work with HashiCorp on the console team. I'm primarily involved in gateway API stuff, but caught a talk on admin network policy stuff at KubeCon, and definitely interested in it as we start thinking about auth things for Gamma, which is gateway API for east-west service mesh stuff. So I'm mostly just lurking, trying to learn a bit more.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I'll go. Brian Oliver, I'm a principal architect at ThoughtWorks. I met Andrew at the SIG Network intro meeting, something. Anyway, and then just jumped in on a few GitHub issues, got a few PRs in over the last few days, so that was fun. And I think today we're going to talk about conformance testing, so that'll be fun. And I think that was my first ever PR to anything Kubernetes, so that was cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love it. It's great to hear. Thank you.
Hi, am I the David that should introduce myself?
Yeah, go ahead, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm Dave Lunro. I work for Illumio, and we've been trying to figure out how to kind of attach our control plane to Kubernetes network data plane and not have to do it 27 different ways in 27 different places, and hoping this is going to yield the answer and that I'll be able to contribute in some way.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, this is mostly related to policy APIs, but I definitely think that's an important part of it. So hopefully we can help.
Yeah, it feels like there's maybe 4 different parts of this effort that I'm going to need to attend to kind of crossover between, you know, policy and infrastructure stuff and gateway
Cool.
API.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Well, super excited to see some new folks out of KubeCon. Already have some new contributions from Brian. So yeah, huge shout out. Like, we need more of that. We need help. So it's great. Hopping straight into it, at KubeCon, we did a contributors talk on admin network policy, which was really well received. I know Mike was there and some others. As soon as I get the link to it, I will post it here. In the meantime, I can go ahead and post our slides from that meetup so that anyone here who is interested can take a look. But that talk went really well. We also spoke about admin network policy in the SIG network meet and greet. And again, Brian was there, and I believe that went really well too. So I'll post those slides as well for folks who weren't there. And as soon as I have access to the recordings, I'll share those as well for everyone to kind of check out. Some other interesting notes from KubeCon itself was everyone I talked to was really interested with admin network policy and policy in general. It wasn't just restricted to that. Rahul, I had many a conversation with folks interested in some sort of FQDN policy, and I pointed them your way. So that was pretty exciting to see. You know, the need is there. It's just about like what we can actually accomplish with our, upstream time in this group. So it was definitely motivating, and I hope it's motivating to everyone here who's been working on all this stuff for a long time. I know Yang and Rahul have been with us for a while working on it. So small but dedicated group.
Sounds like you had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. Getting to meet a lot of people. It was really a great great experience and just kind of gets you motivated to keep working on it, right? I mean, it was pretty cool for, contributors. We had the contributor conference and it's like 100 people. And then the conference itself is like 10,000. So you can really see like your reach. Like it's pretty cool to be working on core Kubernetes, whereas you have all these, consumers of it in every different industry. So should be a motivating factor, I think. Pretty exciting for me, at least. Surya, who is not here, also helped us present the admin network policy. She's another Red Hatter, and she is in EU. So this is kind of a hard meeting for her to make. And that was actually another agenda topic I was going to put on is the possibility of moving this meeting to a more EU friendly time, but I can do that in Slack, I think a little bit easier. I can throw a vote link in there and we can just vote on it. So does anyone have any questions from KubeCon, questions about admin network policy, questions in general? Happy to take anything. Cool. Yeah, I think that's all I had from KubeCon. Like I said, I'll try and share those presentations as I get them. Okay. What else do we have? Yeah, so the next item we had on the agenda was about ANP, admin network policy conformance testing. So let me pull that issue up really quick. I just have to go find it. Oh, and one other thing from KubeCon that I wanted to highlight here is Rob Scott from the Gateway API did a really good presentation on building a Kubernetes API with CRDs, pretty much exactly what we're doing, right, with admin network policy. So I'm going to post that here as well. I'll post that link in the agenda as well, because I think for us, it's pretty relevant. And it goes into some of the day two stuff we haven't really thought about, such as versioning and stable versus experimental channels and other stuff that we're gonna have to start thinking about. But that kind of all brings us into adding some conformance testing for our API. So that's really important, right? As we are veering off into creating implementations, I think Yang is kind of in the process of, I know Surya is in the process of for Oven Kubernetes. I'm hoping Google is for Cilium. Rahul might have some more input on that. I know Vinay had said he was going to put that on the list. Not sure what the status is, but anyway, the point being is like we have these implementations kind of rolling, and we're going to need a set of tests to basically ensure that those implementations are conforming to the API. Now that's pretty tricky, right? It's hard to start thinking about conformance tests before any implementations are done, but I think it's something we need to do. And Brian kind of raised his hand to take this on, and I know Surya also was looking at it because she's writing an implementation. Yep. So I just wanted to voice it here and ask if anyone has any suggestions, ideas. I think for the first take, we're going to roughly kind of try to mimic what Gateway API has done. They've written a bunch of good conformance tests.
How did they deal with the chicken and egg problem though, of like implementation before conformance, like in their case?
So I taught.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I guess some of it is just trying to get a consensus from at least like 2 to 3 different implementations on what proposed functionality is something that seems reasonable. And hopefully, like in our case, we have like Envoy and a few non-Envoy meshes. So if you have any like outliers that like have a very different implementation, making sure that like they have a seat in those conversations. And then once that you have consensus of like writing the test, then basically doing a second pass once you start getting implementations and updating or adding to the conformance test as may be.
So Mike, did you all like, I guess this would have been kind of a while ago for you, but were you able to get that process started like when implementers were first trying to do it, or did you have to do it after like Envoy already finished their implementation?
There is, well, I guess there is now. At the time, there was no like Envoy community implementation. There was just a handful of vendors implementing. So I have only been involved with the project for the past year, so I was not part of that initial phase, but we're looking at doing something similar in Gamma now. So and we're planning to approach it a similar way of like agree across Istio console, Linkerd, and Microsoft OSM of like what and like calling Kuma folks of like what should this do, and then try to get a test written and then iterate on do we find any issues of like what can this actually do, and are there anything weird that came out of that?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and we're thankful that most of the implementers are usual. They come to this meeting usually. I don't know, Yang, do you have any thoughts there? I know you've kind of been working on an implementation for Antria. Do you think this is something we should kind of get rolling with, right away as soon as possible, or are you not even ready to think about conformance testing yet?
Well, we are actually, what we're doing right now, because I think, I've been doing a lot of things in terms of other part of the policy in Antria, and now I'm devoting some time myself actually to develop features that are comparable with the admin policy. So in Antria we have our own policy types, and what we're trying to do right now is to first of all put the feature parity into the Antria policy and admin policy, because we own the Antria policy CRDs, right? So there are functionalities that are in Antria, but in admin policy that are not yet in Antria policy. For example, the same labels and not same labels stuff. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm adding those functionalities in the Antria policies itself first, to just so that it's easier to do the implementation and stuff. And after we actually pour admin policy in, we can reuse the same code because the logic should be exactly the same. It's just another CRD wrapper that's user facing. The controller logic should be the same. So what we're doing right now is that we're adding these functionalities, and we're using in-house Antria CI to test that we think those things are doing what they are supposed to do. Obviously, for admin policies, yes, definitely when we roll it out, I think we definitely needed to have some sort of like conformance testing, and it's better, in my opinion, to start earlier than later, because otherwise you will have a bunch of implementation already written, and then you're asking each CNI basically to manually test it, with all the possible scenarios they can think of, which is gonna be really tedious. Right.
Yeah, so it should be upstream. That should be
exactly upstream. Exactly. So I'm hoping that for anything that any conformance testing scenarios, stuff like that we do for in Antria could be like a reference point for any upstream conformance testing, because we have a bunch of them we have a lot of them already in Antria, and a lot of the regular test cases is like a matrix spacing. I think it's really close to what Cyclonus looks like. It's like when you spin up a bunch of namespaces and a bunch of pods, then you will have a reachability matrix, and then you apply a bunch of policies and I define that, hey, from pod 1 to pod 15 this should be dropped, and from pod 14 to pod 12 this should be dropped, and everything else on this matrix should be connected. And after it's like a truth table, exactly, right? So after you apply these policies and you run all the connectivities, you just verify the reachability matrix is correct. And I think this is how the conformance test is built right now in Entria for the other features of Entria policy. But I think the same concept should apply for admin network policies. Because if you think about this, when you want to test something like same labels and not same labels, you definitely needs to spin up quite some pod in label to make sure that these traffic are making sense, because you need at least 4 namespaces for the results to actually show that, hey, the policy is behaving as expected. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So we could potentially use Entrea as like a validation as we design the tests in a way. Like it's almost like we could validate the tests work using Entrea in a way because it's already implemented to a degree. Is that kind of what we're thinking?
I think that's a really good place to start, right? So Entrea's got a cluster network policy object that is probably the most similar to what the new API we've created out of the cluster scoped policy objects I've seen. Cilium also has one, but it's more of like just a existing network policy at a cluster scope. So it's not really a different API. And Calico is more similar again to like a existing network policy sort of engine. So yeah, Antria is probably a good place to look. We just have to make sure, obviously, like that Oven Kubernetes can implement, all of the things that Antria is implementing. And at the core, they're both using OVS, so they should be able to, I believe. But it's just a matter of like assembling a list of tests or a truth table of tests that we want to be enforced by every implementation, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, out of curiosity, do you know how Oven Kubernetes right now does, the conformance testing or CI testing on the policy features?
They just use the upstream testing. So like pure, the upstream truth table testing, because we don't implement any policy. Well, we have egress firewall, which has its own suite of testing, but that doesn't really fit in here. But for network policy, like we don't have a cluster scope network policy object yet.
Okay.
So we just do the existing upstream test. So yeah, I think that's a good place to get started. Like maybe if you want, Brian, you can check out what Antria does and check out some of their tests. And I think what might be good to do is start either a doc or do it in a GitHub issue and just start thinking through cases we need to test. Maybe not like manually, like we could even talk at the truth table level, but kind of thinking about the design. Now, the other thing of note that kind of plays into this issue is, Yang mentioned it earlier, and a lot of folks, because we haven't done a good job of documenting it yet, we have this tool called Cyclonus in our repo today, right? And Cyclonus is already kind of just that. It's a kind of conformance engine for network policy. So our original plan was just to extend, reuse the tooling Cyclonus already provides and extend it to admin network policy. On top of that, we need to add more documentation. Like right now, you come to our repo, like we don't talk about Cyclonus at all on the main page. Like we don't have any reference to it. We don't have, we have the existing instructions from the repo that we imported, but like we need to be clear with users of our repo, like where this fits in. And so there's kind of a lot to that, right? So that's 2 good things to start on, I think, Brian, is like maybe dig into Antria and dig into Cyclonus. Like maybe get Cyclonus up and running. Maybe get Cyclonus up and running in our CI, because they did have some CI that we aren't running right now because we just like consumed their work. So you might be able to use that. They're actually had it running for, it looks like Antria, Calico, and Cilium. So that's interesting.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. It could add it to the existing CI we just put in. Okay.
Right. Exactly. So just of note, though, we might not necessarily want all our CI to be running in Paral like we did for formatting and verification. Like some of this we might want to just do and hit GitHub Actions because it's easier for us to iterate on. And like these are bigger systems, right? But yeah, good place to start. And for anyone on this call who's looking for a good first tackle, like I have an issue for this. It's like a generic issue called documentation. Like if you have any ideas on how to make this prettier and how to make this README better, like do it. Like I need help. It's a good place to just kind of hop in. Okay.
Did you want to talk about your idea around the upstream eBPF implementation? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to give it a try, which is creating a eBPF based admin network policy implementation. Dan and I were gonna kind of tackle that, whereas he was gonna do the network policy and I was gonna do the admin network policy. I think our priorities have shifted a little bit for this quarter, because they do kind of go together. Like if we're gonna do admin network policy and eBPF, we probably need to do the network policy as well because of past rules. So yeah, if anyone has free time and wants to learn more about eBPF, I'm totally down to help out with it. I'm just struggling to find the time this quarter. What seems more realistic to get done fast, at least for a first draft, is Antria's work and the Evan Kubernetes work. Cilium, like I said, they're set. Google said to be doing it, but I haven't had an update for a while, so I don't really know where they're at.
We're not on our side. We're not making any progress this quarter for sure.
Yeah,
there's just been a whole bunch of other stuff that's come up. It's on the radar for early next year, but I'll have more updates as we get closer.
Awesome. No worries. Thanks for just saying that. I kind of got that sentiment from the folks I talked to at KubeCon. It seems like y'all are really strapped with downstream stuff right now, so I get it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I think that's a good place to start on the conformance. Mike's input on like what the Gateway API did and does is really helpful. The other thing Gateway API does that I found was interesting, and I think they talk more about it in the presentation I attached, is they do have a way of specifying like what parts of APIs are implemented by everyone or maybe like newer. We don't know if we can implement them by everyone. They call it like channels. They have like, I think, stable, experimental, and something else. And that could also be a cool mechanism we could bring in, like for V1 Alpha 2, if we want to introduce some like feature that we don't think it could be possible, it could not be possible. Like we'll probably need to introduce a thing like that, and it would play into the conformance testing as well. So just kind of something to think about if you get bored and want to read more. Go check out the Gateway API. They're doing some cool stuff.
They had the channel stuff baked
Cool.
into some of their CI as well. Like they would actually pass through each channel in some of their pre-commit tests with their PRs. So you can actually see it there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that we're probably going to need to do something of the same with that, based on what we add. I mean, originally when we specified, we even before we're worried about implementability, when we specified that admin network policy only touched east-west traffic, so only cluster traffic, we were kind of worried that there might be some implementations that couldn't do that, and maybe that's still a valid worry. I haven't heard any voices that say that yet, but I can imagine, as we keep gaining momentum and actually get some implementations, folks might come out of the woodworks. So it's something to keep in mind.
I thought we had decided it was not a valid worry because regular network policy already requires you to be able to make that distinction.
We did that, but I don't know did we ever go and make sure that the conformance tests and network policy actually verified that?
I mean, they don't verify it exhaustively.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably impossible to verify it exhaustively, but yeah, I mean, the legacy reasons for that are that for the decisions we made are all in the KEP, so we can go back and look. But anyway, it's just kind of a point of like, if we create something that's not implementable at some level. Thankfully, we haven't run into anything yet, but we're still young. So cool. That's all I had for today. I'm pretty sure there are some open issues. I wonder on our repo if we can check those out really quick. Yang, I know, is working on updating the KEP. I need to go review that, Yang. It's been weeks. I'm sorry. It's on my list. Did you push that to?
It's on me because I haven't actually pushed it on to the actual enhancement. It's just, I originally wanted to, open a merge request in my own fork, and then after you review that, I push it onto the actual enhancement. But I don't think that's necessary. So I will just open a PR against the enhancement repository, I think, or Kubernetes enhancement repository. Yeah. And so that everybody.
Yeah, no worries. Whenever it's like, and for folks who didn't understand what I was saying, like we wrote the admin network policy KEP, it got merged, and then the actual API that merged here is a bit different. So we need to go back and update the KEP. And Yang's kind of taking the charge. So another good place for folks to get involved once he pushes it up, because you can learn kind of what changed between KEP review to actual implementation. There are some good ideas here. I know Dan opened a pretty reasonable one regarding, same, not same namespaces. Surya was taking a look at it. I do think she has that fairly under wraps. And it made a lot of sense. So if you're interested, go read. We do have some random kind of ideas. So this one is like trying to keep an up-to-date table of implementations and what they support for both network policy, any policy API in Kubernetes. That could be cool. Really, like, I'm willing to merge anything to our repo that helps Kubernetes users understand any policy API. So like network policy or admin network policy. Like if we can have tools here that help users, like let's put them in here. Like this is the place for them to live. So some good ideas there.
Thinking about the simulation one, but decided to think about it more. It just sounds really hard. I don't even know where to begin with that other than thinking about maybe some kind of eBPF based simulator, but it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky because it depends. It depends on the backend in some cases, weirdly enough. But for the most part, I think what you could do here is make some sort of command line tool that just kind of prints out what pods are affected and what those pods can talk to and cannot talk to. And I think Cyclonus does some of that. So like maybe an investigation of Cyclonus will turn over some stones onto, it might already do some of this. Yeah, I know Cyclonus does some stuff, and I haven't poked at it in so long that I've kind of forgotten, but that's why we brought it here, so we can actually keep using it and pick up on where they've left off. I know Matt is still kind of helping out, but he's on to other things. He's who started it. So yeah, if you're interested, just give it a poke and say, I'm checking this out. Don't be scared. If you do assign it to yourself and then have to unassign it, it's not a big deal.
I'll take one at a time.
So is the idea to get in the new type of policy as well into Cyclonus then, or?
Yes, yeah, we were talking about that before you hopped on.
Sorry.
No worries. You're all good. We're thinking about that for conformance testing. So the links to contributor guidelines, I had opened that and it's already fixed. I just need to close it. Motivate network plugins to use port names DNS. That's kind of an interesting one. Right, need to test to check some error. Huh. This is probably more of a addition to the upstream SIG network tests, but it's definitely something we can talk about here and think about here. I'd have to go look at what the tests verify now, like if they're not, because I thought we had named port tests in upstream CI, but could be wrong.
Wait, is this for the actual network, the current Kubernetes network policy, not the admin network
Yeah.
policy?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the name port
Oh.
thing is, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, so I was going to say, this is somebody who I talked to at KubeCon. Actually, I talked to her at KubeCon in Valencia and then didn't really get back to it. And this probably didn't belong in this repo, but she filed it here and I was like, well, maybe we'll talk about it at the meeting. So the idea is that lots of people want to be able to write network policies that allow DNS. And it's actually kind of tricky to do that right now because depending on the Kubernetes distro, the policy has to specify a different port. Like in OpenShift, the pods actually listen on port 5353 so that they don't need whatever the capability is that lets you bind low ports. So, and if everybody consistently implemented the named port feature, then we could make sure that core DNS used a named port, and then you could write a policy using that, and everybody would be able to use the same policy everywhere. And in fact, we could make the tests use use DNS again, like they used to before we got rid of that because it was problematic. So anyways, that's what this is about.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's definitely a reasonable thing. Do you foresee like a bunch of pushback to adding DNS back into those tests, even if we got everyone to agree to do this or all implementations?
I mean, if we felt that or thought that everybody was going to implement this, then yeah, I mean, using DNS in the test is fine.
Cool. I wonder if to ensure this doesn't get dropped in, do you think we should like open a mirror issue against KK?
Or maybe just move this to KK.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's some bot that I can use to do that actually automatically. I can look.
Yeah, I don't know if it can literally be done automatically, but we could just respond and say, hey, why don't you refile this against KK?
Just a quick clarification. I mean, there's nothing special about DNS here, right? That's just an example of if the person using or the person deploying workloads names all their ports DNS, then it would work, that sort of thing. Or...
Yeah, it's just sort of DNS is the motivating feature for it, but it's really just ensure everybody implements named ports.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I don't have a good sense of how many people already do and don't. I know it's better than it used to be, but
I know for Andrea, definitely, we do named ports. I think it's just that, for Kubernetes network policies, it doesn't, in my opinion, has a really extensive or good documentation on named ports, because people needed to understand when they write that in ingress and egress rules, there are a little bit of difference. When they write egress rules, the named port are resolved on the egress peers, whereas when you actually write the ingress rule that has named ports, the named port are actually resolved on pod selector workloads rather than the actual ingress peers, because it's always the destination named port that gets resolved. So this kind of behavior wasn't highlighted anywhere in any sort of like documentations, because when we try to implement these features, I checked quite extensively, but I didn't find those anywhere. It just says you can use name port for resolving ports, but that's it basically. So I've actually had I remember not Entra users, but some downstream VMware distribution users who actually used the name port in the wrong fashion, and they were expected policies to be working, but they are actually not using it correctly. So I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, to me, it's completely obvious that it works the way that it does, but I guess all of network policy is confusing and complicated. So yes, I can totally imagine people being confused.
You're saying on an ingress rule, they were confused about on which end of the connection the name port was referring to?
Right.
Basically.
I think Yeah, I think that was the case. Yeah.
Yeah, that I can see how that could possibly be, but I don't know what the fix is there, right? Is it just adding documentation to the API somewhere or in the
Yeah.
API itself? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
That'd be a pretty easy fix. Okay. Cool. Well, that's all I had for today. Do folks have other questions, comments, concerns about anything we're working on? Going once, going twice. Sold. Cool. Well, we'll give everyone about 20 minutes back. Thanks for all the new faces that we got to see today. And yeah, if there's any questions, comments, just please reach out in the Slack channel and keep doing what you're doing. Hope you have a good week. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Yep.